Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order tonight. Thank all of you in attendance for attending this evening. Be advised that the Board of Zoning and Appeals acts as a quasi-judicial body, hearing appeal matters and requests for code exceptions. Testimony will be accepted from all persons interested in speaking on an item. Persons interested in speaking will be asked to approach the lectern to state their name, address, and interest in the matter at hand. All testimony shall be directed to the chair, be relative to the item of business being discussed, and be presented with conduct appropriate to this setting. Any person exhibiting behavior deemed inappropriate by the chairperson of this body will be ordered to leave the premises. Once all persons wishing to speak on the matter have spoken, the floor will be closed and the board will deliberate amongst themselves before taking final action on the item. The order of business will be conducted as follows. The minutes of the previous meeting will be reviewed and acted upon. Old business will be conducted, new business will be conducted, other business will be conducted, and the meeting will be adjourned. The conduct for the hearing for variance and appeals items, a modified Robert's Rules of Order will be used in hearing the items of business. The clerk will read the agenda item, staff will comment and respond to questions from the board. The applicant will comment and respond to questions from the board. The public will be given an opportunity to comment. The public comment will be closed. The board will deliberate on the item. During this time, the chair may request witnesses to return to the lectern to respond to additional questions from the board. Upon hearing a motion, the board will stop discussion on the matter and the chair will ask if there is a second. Hearing a motion and a second, the chair will ask the clerk to call the roll and vote on the motion will be recorded. Since tonight we are 2 members short, we do have a quorum, but it will require all 3 votes or unanimous decision for the motion to carry. If there are no objections from anyone in attendance to the aforementioned meeting procedures, would everyone present please stand, raise your right hand to be sworn in. Let it be known that all persons present to provide testimony at this hearing today on March 28th, meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals hereby swear or affirm said testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth. All those in agreement, please say, I do.
I do.
I do.
All those opposed, say opposed. Thank you. You may be seated. If any person indicates they are opposed to the conditions, we don't want to read that. So we can head to the agenda.
So I believe we should start with the roll call, so I'll go ahead. Mr. Dave Fishback is absent. Ms. Shannon Brandon?
Here.
Mr. Wayne Davey? Absent. Mr. Wade Davis?
Present.
Mr. Nick Johnston, excuse me.
Present.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to excuse Wayne Davey and Dave Fishback from tonight's meeting.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second motion. Please call the roll.
Ms. Shannon Brandon?
Aye.
Mr. Wade Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nick Johnston?
Aye.
Thank you, Kristen. Each of you have had the meeting minutes from our February 28th meeting, and you should have had time to review them by now. Are there any changes or additions or things that we need to make to those minutes?
It's not a big deal. It's more of a spelling
Sure.
error, but I think you may have misspelled Aaron's
That's so
name.
funny. He said that to me earlier today.
Okay.
So, yes. Okay. We can fix that for the record.
I'd make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of February 28, 2023.
I will second that motion.
Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Shannon Brandon?
And we'll move on to old business. Does anybody have any comments or things they would like to discuss for old business?
Not for old,
Okay.
under new.
We'll now go on to the new business. And
Before we hear this agenda item, I would like to say something. I've been thinking about this. So, with the Board of Zoning Appeals, and Kirsten actually puts it right in our, in the resolution, there are these things called Duncan factors. And it's, when you look at the resolution, it's actually the little line items that are boxed. That came out of a court case of the Ohio Supreme Court of Duncan versus Middlefield. And basically what it did, in essence, with that case was whenever you hear an area variance, not a use variance, but an area variance, say like for setbacks, that type of thing, basically the Supreme Court said boards of zoning appeal need to make sure that you apply the Duncan factors to your decision. And I think that it would benefit us as a board when we do our deliberation amongst ourselves to actually go through those enumerated items in the resolution and answer those to be a part of the minutes. So that way, if there's ever a question down the road, if an applicant would appeal in a decision that the board has made, that a court can look at that we have actually applied the Duncan factors, and it kind of adds a layer of protection for the board, so that way the court can't come right out and say you're being arbitrary and capricious. And that way, it may add 2-3 minutes to our time in the process of hearing this, but I do think it would benefit us as a board if we actually answered those questions one by one. Just a suggestion.
I can, if I might comment on that. I think that's a good idea, and I also think it's basically just as adequate what you've done in the past, listing any reasons that you've made the decision. One, I make a motion because 1, 2, 3, and those are also valid reasons to make a motion. So this is a list that is, it's pretty comprehensive, but it doesn't, you may have other reasons why you granted a variance. Our updated code is going to give a less court case based check system for how variances can be issued. And this is usually what's applied in cases where a zoning code doesn't specify any other reasons. But that's just some context for that. So yeah, any reason that you're stating is useful for that ability to call something not arbitrary. At least that's how I see it. You've been in the profession too, so.
That's all I had.
anything else? Okay. Any other comments before we get started? If not, Kirsten, would you go ahead and read the resolution BZA 6-23?
A resolution requesting a variance for an increase in the maximum size allowed for an accessory structure in a residential district. And I'll go right to the staff report. Mr. Jack Pleasant, the property owner, has submitted a request for a variance for 1305 Park Avenue. This is parcel N44094340, and the request is to increase the maximum size allowed for an accessory structure to 2,376 square feet, which represents the existing 36 by 66 garage. I'm just going to read my staff report just to give the full context. A complaint from a nearby resident was received in early February that the accessory garage structure had been extended and that the extension was too close to them to be comfortable and that the noise coming from the accessory structure was excessive. The city's code compliance staff inspected from a nearby public right-of-way and confirmed that the building was larger than originally permitted. They contacted the property owner and mailed out a CVN to document the problem, since the structure had already been built without a zoning permit, so it made sense to document and kind of go through the formalized process immediately rather than have some kind of gray area, so CVM was issued. The property owner has sought a variance to remedy the problem, as a zoning permit for the area of the accessory structure cannot be approved administratively, and the alternative would have to be to remove the extension back to what was originally permitted and approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in 2020. So that's something that should be understood, as not having a variance to increase to the area that it is now results in enforcement to remove the area that was added on to since that first variance. The code allows accessory structures to be up to 50% of the area of the principal structure or the rear yard, whichever is less. The area of Mr. Pleasant's principal structure is 2,368 square feet, which permits him up to 1,184 square feet by right. The variance granted in 2020 allowed an exception up to 1,440 square feet, and the structure is now 2,376 square feet. The property owner has submitted reasoning that his lot at 5.39 acres is large enough to accommodate a larger structure than typically allowed by the code without adverse impacts to neighbors, because the structure is not near the property lines and is completely screened by trees and shrubs. So, along with the letter to start this process, Mr. Pleasant offered some pictures. So I include, the CVN is included, so you're going to see pictures taken by code compliance that kind of give the full scope of the change. You can see the addition by the slight difference in color of the roof will tell you that that's the new part. Mr. Pleasant offered I think it was Mr. Pleasant who submitted this before addition picture, and the picture of the addition, as well as a picture that he took as he measured from the property line to the structure, which was 38 feet. I would say, normally in cases, this is a little bit of a blended case because it's an enforcement, and yet we're doing a variance request to remedy the situation. If this were right on paper, I would have recommended to the applicant to scale it back, not to go as large as it is, just because it's exceeding the principal structure, so it's hard to call it an accessory structure when it gets this big. Usually we'd like to see the accessory structure be, in some sense subservient on the lot to the principal structure. That's the main structure. As it is, the structure is already built, so the options are a lot more limited. We're not talking about design here anymore. We're talking about, option A or option B being scaling back to the original. So with that, I would take any questions.
How many structures are permitted, accessory structures?
Each lot is allowed 3 accessory structures, and one of those structures can be a garage.
Thank you.
In the original, in this case, originally, one of the requests was to have an additional garage structure because there were 2 on the lot. Or there was 1 on the lot initially, and then the second was built. And I'm pretty sure that what happened, and maybe Mr. Pleasant can confirm, but I think the actual original garage got replaced by this structure rather than a second one.
So, when you say you're allowed up to 3 accessory structures, and the code says that the accessory structures have to be 50% of the area, is that the sum total of all 3, or each one can be 50%?
Each one can be up to 50%, but there's typically not a second garage, if that makes sense. So usually you're talking, you can have a garage and a shed, a garage and a shed and a greenhouse, a garage and a shed and a gazebo. Those are all things that can be included.
Is there anything?
What?
Is there
That
anything
50%.
stating that you can't have multiple garages?
Yes. it's one garage. I should correct myself. No, that 50% is just, so I'm sorry. The 50% comes from the garage standard itself. So everybody gets 720 square feet, which is a 24 by 30, or it can increase up to 50% of the total area of the footprint of the house or the rear yard, whichever one is less. And that's the whole thing. So, yes. So the other two structures cannot necessarily go that high.
Okay. And then what's the minimum setback in this district?
That's a good question. I believe it's R1AA, so it would be 12 feet on the side setbacks, but for accessory structures, it's always 3 feet, unless it's, at this scale, it would be 6 feet for the accessory structure.
Okay. And then, so on the original variance permit, was the setback originally 38 feet? And now the additional part of the garage that was added on, is it at the same setback as the originally granted variance?
I think according to the site plan, the setback was originally planned for 20 feet, so either the measurement to the fence is not quite right, or as far as if that fence is the property line, or it got set back further into the lot than originally permitted, which isn't necessarily a problem.
But it's no closer to the
No.
property line?
That's correct. So the extension went to the south instead of to the east.
Gotcha.
Any other comments directed to Crystal? At this time, we'll invite the applicant to approach the lectern and speak.
Hi. My name's Jack Pleasant. I am the applicant. I have 5 teenage drivers. Well, 5 drivers, 3 teenage drivers, myself, my wife. I own 30 residential properties here in Piqua. This was for storage. This whole building or structure was originally to be completed to scale during the COVID. COVID hit, the builder unfortunately went bankrupt like a lot of others. This guy called me in the last month and a half and said, hey, to avoid any litigation we're going through, I've got your materials, I'll make this right with you. He came out, he did the addition, which maybe it's my fault he didn't pull the permit, I'm a grown man. But I thought him being a builder, he could handle it. So this is what happened. The original structure had a concrete pad on it that was on the end. None of the setbacks were changed. We're still 39 feet from either property on the side, and probably 300 feet to 400 feet from any rear property. He just basically walled it in, as you see in the pictures, just so I could hide my trailers, any other building materials. I don't want setting out in the yard. I don't like 5 cars sitting in my driveway, even though I'm 500 feet off the street. I just try to take care of my place.
Did you pull the original
Yes.
permit?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But you didn't ask him if he pulled a permit for
No,
this
I didn't,
addition?
because, I was just honored that the guy was willing to make it right after all that. I thought I was just out of luck on the money and
Right, but I mean, he actually wasn't making it right. He was
I know.
making it bigger.
well, he was supplying the stuff that he originally should have supplied is what I mean by it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I should have said I was honored that he at least called and said, hey, I feel bad about this. What can we do?
So the original variance was to increase the size to 1,440 square feet, right?
Yes.
So how did we get to 2376? He just out, goodness, his
no.
heart added all the extra free material and built it?
The original, there's a lot of stuff that wasn't done to the inside of it. If you look at the pictures I submitted to Kirsten, there is a concrete pad on the end of this place where I parked open trailers. It just looked trashy, to be honest with you. So he said, I told him, I said, you owe me some money because you didn't complete everything you were supposed to complete. And, that's where we're at now. So if you look at that, you'll see that That part there is what got walled in. If you look at the other picture, you'll see a dump truck sitting on that pad.
So when you planned out the original garage,
Uh-huh,
and you had the concrete pad,
yeah.
so you've added almost 1,000 square feet onto what was originally built,
Yeah,
correct?
About, well, he went 30 feet this way, yeah, so probably so.
Okay, so you still had all those trailers and vehicles and things at that time, right, with the
No.
original?
No, I didn't. And I mean, I wasn't gonna allude to it, but during COVID, I lost my father and my younger brother. And I have my youngest brother living with me now. So in order to settle their estates, everything from their house came to my house until I can get it all sorted out. I mean, that's just, it is. You know, I've got, I think, 8, 9 cars, 2 construction trailers, a couple enclosed trailers. We're just trying to work through all of it.
So what is the total acreage of the entire lot?
5.4 or 5.5.
So the acreage back behind the house, like, I drove by, it looks like most of that, what, 75% is in the front?
No, maybe 30.
So 30%, so it goes back even
It
further?
It goes back all the way to Maplewood.
Okay.
It's a pretty big lot.
One of my friends growing up lived there, the Malarkeys.
Yeah,
So yeah, I knew there was a lot of land back behind it.
yeah, there's more land behind it and to the side of it than there is actually in the front.
Was the complaints of noise, those complaints, was that with the building of the structure, or was that?
No, I do believe it was with the building, and I'll explain that. This gentleman, if you remember one day, we had, it was within the last month and a half, we had one day where it was 55 degrees. He poured the cement for the posts to go around it. That night, it went to 0. So they were probably out there till 11 or 12 o'clock with brooms trying to work the cement, just so it didn't bust up.
I don't have any other questions.
Does anyone have any additional questions for Mr. Pleasant?
No, I'll be honest, I still can't get past the part where you originally applied for a permit, but then there was no permit for the addition.
I did, and I'll be honest with you on that. When he called, he said, you have about 2 weeks extra free time. Do you want me to make this right? I said, yeah, I just jumped at it and said, yes, make it right.
Who applied for the variance to get to the 1,000?
Original, that was
Well,
done
the
by,
variance that was approved in 2020 to 1,440 square feet.
that was the original build, and that was done by myself with
Okay.
Kirsten's help.
Okay. So the original building was 1,440, which that was oversized to begin with, but the variance was approved.
Yes,
So then the addition came on without any type of building permit or variance or anything, correct?
Did you get a building permit from the county?
I'm going to.
But so you got no permits
I have
whatsoever?
not, I have not. That's how we're at this situation. When I called him, he said,
Wow.
well, I thought we'd just do it. And it fell under the original. It did not fall under the original. I know that now.
Is this more of a, I'll ask for forgiveness before I ask for permission type
No,
of deal?
No, I would not operate like that. Like I said, I work full-time here in town, have 30 different residential properties that we buy and sell. I mean, I'm not gonna do something to make a mistake to intentionally cause myself more trouble. I mean,
Who was the builder?
the original builder was Bob Dries, and I don't wanna cast any shadow on the guy. I mean, it is what it is,
So who did the addition?
Bob Dries.
Okay, so he did it all. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Do you have anything else you want to direct to us before?
No, I apologize for the mistake or whatever, and there was no ill intent in it. I mean, I can't stand up here and lie, I won't do that. I mean, did he pull a permit? No. Did I pull a permit? No now. I know that. And, you know, when talking to him, he said, well, I thought you did it. I said, no, Bob, I thought you did it. I mean, it was not built, you know, for 6 months. It was a quick span.
Well, more than likely, if a permit was requested, it would have been denied because of the size.
We would have, I wouldn't have been able to prove anything administratively, and he would have been free to apply for another variance.
That he had to come back and get another variance to add that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And one more thing, like I said, I'm just trying to be courteous to my neighbors. I know we all have nice homes. I don't want 7 or 8 vehicles sitting in the driveway at all times. I don't want trailers sitting in the driveway, even though they're all tagged, and like I said, I'm 500 feet off the street. I just don't want to deal with that.
And I understand what you're saying, and you have a tremendously large lot for a residential lot. I mean, I totally understand that. But you're in business to flip houses, right?
Right?
You understand what you have to do to get you. So I understand that you're saying that the builder contacted you and said, look, I want to make this right. I understand that you have a concrete pad that's already poured, I'm assuming has a footer so it can withstand the framing. So I get that. But you, as someone who flips houses, knows you have to have permits, not just a zoning permit, but a building permit. And it's quite obvious when you don't have a building permit because you don't have the placard hanging up that has to be visible.
Ma'am, I never had the placard with the original one. It was during COVID. I mean, no one came out.
And I understand that, but we're not in COVID.
I understand
And
that.
your business is in the business of building things, flipping things, refurbishing them. I'm assuming electric, HVAC,
And-
roofs.
And in that scope of business, when I hire someone to do something, I don't go pull that permit in my name. They pull it in theirs.
And I understand that, but there again, with the type of business that you're in, you understand that there are permits that have to be pulled.
I do understand that, and as soon as Aaron contacted me, I came straight down here, and I told him exactly what happened. I mean, I won't beat around the bush about it.
If there are no other questions for Mr. Pleasant, then I'll open the floor to other interested parties that would like to speak. Kirsten, we mailed out the mailing list. Did we get any respondents?
No, nothing came after the original phone call.
Okay. So we've received only one phone call, and can we tie that into the date of the construction?
Oh, as in, I don't know. I guess I don't know when the building was constructed.
Okay. Sure, Mrs. Kuhn, please approach.
Good evening. My name is Ruth Kuhn. I'm here along with my husband Jim, and we live at 1307 Park Avenue, right next door to the Pleasants. They do have probably one of the most largest lots in Piqua and probably one of the most beautiful lots in Piqua. However, before the Pleasants moved in, we had a major problem with the residents in that house, and to the point where we had to meet with the police chief and a number of other city officials to have them, I forget the word, to vacate the property, which they did do, and there were a number of issues with that group that was there. So the Pleasants moved in, and Jim and I have been very, very pleased with how the property is always maintained. He is always very respectful of the neighbors. But however, after hearing Mrs. Brandon's questions, and I know what you're all thinking, I do see the dilemma. I don't think Jack is asking for, Mr. Pleasant is asking for anything special, but I just wanted to come up and tell you that he probably is one of the most respectful neighbors we could ever have. He also is responsible, he is in the business of redoing houses and then selling them. The house on the corner of Sunset Drive and Park Avenue was a distressful looking, sad property that everybody, when we drove by, would just shake our heads, and we all felt so sorry for the neighbors. However, Mr. Pleasant took it over, and now it's beautiful. Again, I see your dilemma, but I can see Mr. Pleasant's dilemma also in expecting that the builder had the permit, and maybe he was remiss by not following up with that. But I hope maybe you will consider what I just said, his background and how he is respected, and he is very, very conscious of not wanting to have cars in his driveway or anything that's going to upset our beautiful neighborhood. We all have to be responsible for our neighborhoods, and he is. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the subject? If there are no other comments from the floor, then I'll go ahead and close the floor portion and we'll deliberate.
I'm good.
Or do we ask questions and then deliberate?
No, we can deliberate now.
Okay. So we have completed our deliberation process, and I'd like to just make a couple comments before we take a vote. As Mrs. Kuhn said, there's been a huge improvement when you drive up Park Avenue and see that structure. I drove around the other day, and I just wanted to drive around again today just to see and confirm with the things that were in the application, because obviously we got the packet, and as you should have gotten the packet before. It really bothers me that the structure was built without a building permit, especially as Shannon pointed out that you're in that business. So it's really, you've made it really tough on us this evening to review this case. And Shannon or Nick, do you have anything else to add?
No, I agree with what you said.
Okay. Well, at this time, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution BZA 06-23 based on the following finding of fact. The building is still within scale as compared to the overall size of the over 5-acre lot. The setback is actually 3 times further back than what is required by the zoning code, and approval will not diminish or impair established property values of the neighboring properties.
I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second motion to approve Resolution BZA 6-23 and go ahead and approve for the variance. Would you please call roll?
Ms. Shannon Brandon,
Aye.
Mr. Wade Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Nick Johnston.
One moment.
Oh, excuse me.
Is he applying for a variance right now? That's, okay, I did. Aye.
So we have a unanimous decision. Congratulations, it has been approved, and you can go on to the next step.
The only thing I would say is in the future, no matter who your builders are or contractors are, make sure they get their permits, whether it be from the city or the county.
Is there any other new business that we need to consider?
No, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second that motion.
So moved. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And be sure there's a notepad back on the back table. Please enter your name and address so that we have a record of people in attendance. Thank you, and have a good evening.